You're listening to the Outfitter Pros podcast, the show for outdoor enthusiasts by outdoor enthusiasts. On the show, we speak with outfitter owners and outdoor professionals across North America and hear their stories of turning their passion into a profession. Whether you've been in the outdoor industry for years, are thinking of pursuing your own passion as a profession, or simply want to discover new outfitters for your next adventure, this is the show for you. What is up, Outfitter Pros? Paul Wingfield here. I'm super excited for you guys to be tuning in this week and listening to our conversation with Vesna Plakanis. You see, Vesna and her husband Erik started their guide service, A Walk in the Woods, in 1998 with a true desire to just reconnect people back to the natural world. And her true passion really is in helping her guests discover the incredible beauty of all of the small worlds that are found in the Smoky Mountain ecosystem. And not only does she just talk the talk, but she walks it. And she has been involved in conservation efforts, community organizations. She actually testified in D.C. back in 2016 in front of the EPA to ensure that we would all continue to enjoy the cleanest air quality. And then in 2017, she was named one of the top 9 badass babes. And now she's currently a proud executive board member of Discover Life in America. Some of her other passions when she's not doing all of this cool stuff include completing all of the trails in the Great Smoky Mountain National Park, visiting all of the national parks in the country, playing with her dogs, cooking French foods, painting. She's even turning her yard into a native habitat and helping create wildlife corridors in this region by buying land and saving it from development. She's truly a hero. I'm excited for you to hear her story. So without further ado, let's get into our conversation with Vesna. Well, Vesna, welcome to the Outfitter Pros podcast. I am really excited to have you here today and excited to share your story today. How are you?
I'm great, Paul. Thank you. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. It's as we talked about even before we got onto the episode, it's been kind of a crazy morning. I've had meetings get rescheduled and go long, and it's one of those things, right? But I'm here. I'm present. I've had 2 cups of coffee, so
Me too.
I'm caffeinated and ready to go. So I'm really excited to talk with you. One, because you're kind of my neighbor. You're like an hour and a half down the road from where I live in the Great Smoky Mountains. So I'm excited to hear your story of, just how you've grown your business and even how, and we'll get into that. Yeah, it just where you came from to start your business too is pretty interesting. So I'm excited to hear for our audience to hear about this journey as well. So before I even get into the nuts and bolts of starting your business and running your business and challenges that you faced, I always like to kind of hear where did this passion even start? So for our listeners, a walk in the woods is it's a hiking, backpacking kind of outdoor experience, guided outdoor experience for your guests and your clients. But where did this passion start for you?
Well, it really started when I was a kid because I grew up all over the world, but Minnesota was kind of our home base. And so there were a lot of woods behind my yard. And because I was always traveling, I didn't have a lot of friends. So my brother, my dogs, and I would spend hours tramping through our woods and, pretending that we were runaways and we built forts and we were going to live off the land and all of that. So I was just always very connected to the natural world when I was a kid. And then, I went to college and couldn't really quite figure out how I was going to make that a career. Ended up in advertising, radio, and television. Completely off track. But I also graduated from high school very young, so you don't make great decisions when you're a kid. But
That's true.
I loved it, and it was a fun experience. But when I was in college, my parents actually moved to Knoxville, and so the first time I came to visit them, I was driving through Kentucky, and it was fall, and the mountains just opened up with all of their glorious, amazing colors, and I was like, oh my God, it just felt like home.
Mm.
And for a person who had traveled so much and, went to so many different schools and moved so many times, I think I'd moved 25 times by the time I was in my late 20s, to find a place that felt viscerally like home was magical. So I moved down here eventually, lived in Knoxville, worked at a TV station, worked in advertising, and met my husband. And he was living in Atlanta, so we moved to Atlanta. Oh my God. That was the antithesis of what I wanted, what we both wanted. So we spent every weekend, hiking, backpacking. We had a small child, and we just hung out and really immersed ourselves in the North Georgia mountains. And then one day, my husband and I had a little picnic, and we're like, we just don't want to do this anymore. I just can't do this anymore. And it was around the Olympics, and traffic had just exploded, and development. They were bulldozing all of our beautiful, trees and forests near our neighborhood, and it was just like I just couldn't do it. So we kind of brainstormed, and we're like, maybe we'll move to Alaska and homestead. And then we're like, no, because we're vegetarians, and I don't want to eat moose. And so we kind of played around with these different fantasies. And we ended up that afternoon at a little coffee shop and picked up one of those alternative magazines. And in it was an article about a woman who had actually also left corporate America and was studying under a naturalist in North Georgia, in Dahlonega, Mark Warren from Medicine Bow. And he had actually been taught from a Cherokee medicine man. And so he was kind of teaching, Native American, just really kind of getting back to the earth and learning about, tracking and plants and animals and edibles, things that you can eat from the wild. So we started taking all these naturalist courses from him, and it just hit. And so, like a year later, my husband had a bunch of vacation time, and I was working. So I was like, why don't you go on a backpacking trip in the Smokies? Because I had always just loved the Smokies, and I really wanted him to fall in love with this area. So I planned a 10-day trip for him, where he started in Cades Cove and ended up in Smokemont. And when our daughter and I picked him up on the other side, he came out and he's like, I know what we're going to do. We are going to start a guide service. And I'm like, okay. So we did.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's pretty cool. I know because when I have big dreams and I've had these amazing revelations, and I'm just like, hey, babe, we're gonna do this. And she's like, well, hold on a second, let's talk. You want to do
Yeah.
what?
It
Like,
happened exactly, like the
yeah,
next day. We did some
yeah,
planning.
yeah. It's so cool though too, because those experiences, and that's what I love about nature, about being in the woods, the mountains, the river, wherever it may be, is how it inspires you to something more, something greater than yourself, and it really forces you to kind of be present where you're at and evaluate. And it sounds like you guys, you did some evaluating in that moment. Your husband did as he was on this trip, and he was like, "Hey, and this is, I think we need to do this." And it just to how it inspires you to pursue something that's going to be challenging, it's going to be hard, but man, that passion drives you forward. So that's really cool to hear about that experience. I've not done a tremendous amount of backpacking in the Smokies. I'm in the upper reaches of Northeast Tennessee here, so I've spent a lot of time up in Roan Mountain on the Appalachian Trail up there and stuff. That's where I go backpacking. But that's really really cool. So after this 10-day backpacking trip, your husband says, "Okay, we're starting a guide service." Like, what were some of the before you kind of launched into starting your guide service? Like, how did you prepare for that? Like, what were some of the conversations that you were having as you were trying to put together a business plan and things of that nature?
Um, well, the first two things that we did were, come up with a name and a concept. And what we wanted was to make it an accessible experience for
Mm,
everybody. There's a lot of adventure programs out there that are awesome. But we realize the Smokies are the most visited park in the country. At that time, it was 9 million visitors. Now it's 12 million.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's definitely grown in popularity, but we just we felt that that was the need, and that was one of the things that, like, when he was doing his through hike of the park, his vision quest, he'd come to like Newfound Gap, and people would be like, "What makes this place so special?" And they were just people getting out of their cars to go to the bathroom, and so we realized that that was where the need was, to make it
Mhm.
accessible not only for adventure seekers, but really for people who just were looking to connect back to the natural world. And so that was what we really focused on, and that's why we called ourselves a walk in the woods. I mean, if you're only going to go a mile, that's okay. But you're going to get that hands-on exploration. You're going to really immerse yourself, in nature. No matter how far you go, even if it's, in an area right outside of Gatlinburg, that little walking trail that, there's a million people on it, you're still in this beautiful natural world. And so we wanted to help make it accessible to people. So that was one of the very first things that we did, was to sort of come up with that concept. Um, Clearly, you need money. You're not
Sure.
going to just launch this thing. So, a logo, money, business plan, mission statement, all of those things, are very important as background. And then studying your area. We
Mhm.
spent an awful lot of time, in the mountains with, backpacks full of books, and, driving our 7-year old crazy because we'd sit in front of a flower for an hour and a half and study every nuance of that flower. But just really understanding the region. What is it that makes this area so incredible? And my
Mhm.
husband had, one of the things that really lit him up when he did that through hike was he had never seen an old growth forest before. Well, the park contains 90% of the old growth
Wow.
forest in the east. Completely different experience than being in a second, or third growth forest that we have in so much of our eastern coast. Um, and so, really be able to understand these ecosystems. So we spent an awful lot of time with that. And then we planned it so that we'd have enough money to last us a year. If we didn't make a dime, we were going to save all that money. So it took us a while to get to that point. And then, there's the nuts and bolts of it. What were the, what kind of insurance did we need? What kind of permits did we need? Connecting with the local, community, joining a chamber of commerce. We'd walk up and down the streets with brochures and our T-shirts, and it was just, there was an awful lot of behind the scenes, kind of getting ready. But I think a lot of people, when they launch into something like that, they're like, "Oh, this is going to be great." Market research is just so clear; it's so important.
Yeah.
You really have to understand, everything that goes into that. And so we really spend an awful lot of time, and we're lucky. I had that marketing background.
Mhm.
He was a controller for a post-production house, so he's the bean counter of the family. So I'm the dreamer. He's the one that brings me back down to earth. uh,
Wow.
so that,
Wow.
being able to sort of mesh those two, in creating this vision, this business plan, was you know that changed our lives. I mean, that really set the tone for, I think, what became a very successful company very quickly.
Yeah, yeah, and you said something that was, I think, is really important, that a lot of business owners don't take into consideration, because I think when we first are starting a business, we're fueled by the dream of what could be, right? We're so excited, we're so passionate about what we see this business becoming, and I mean, like like it's very slow. It takes a little while to get going. And the fact that you had your market research, I think identifying that target audience, right? Like, who is the person, the ideal person that I want this business to serve? What do they look like? Where do they live? How much money do they make? Are they married? Are they single? Like, doing all of that kind of research is really important, because then that can help to really define your messaging around your marketing, right? And so I'm going to ask this question. And so when you were, because so you're outside of Smoky Mountain National Park is Great Smoky Mountain National Park is outside of Gatlinburg. And Gatlinburg is a very touristy place, very touristy place. So as a tourism-based business, and in a touristy town, how, and you said you joined the local business, the local chamber of commerce. How much of your initial kind of business actually came from locals? I'd be curious to know
Um,
that.
well, we connected with the local outfitter that had been in town at the time, and so that really helped. Tom Broche, who was this curmudgeony guy who was from like Coca-Cola, corporate, and then he also had sort of later, changed his life, and he's like, I'm going to open an outfitter. But that was kind of the go-to place. That's where the thru hikers would stop. That's where people would stop to get gear before they went into the park. It was right there at the
Yeah.
gateway to the park. So we became friends with him. But when we walked in the first time, he's like, "Oh God, not another one." And so we asked our his questions. He's like, I give you guys 6 months, but I like you. Um, so it was that connection to be able to he would send us people. He actually was stopping. He stopped his shuttle service business around the time that we started, and he's like, "Hey guys, you wanna do some shuttles?" And we're like, "Sure, we'd love to do some shuttles." And we walked out the door. We're like, "What are shuttles?" Zero idea.
Wow.
um, but so that was the launching off point. So that is my one of my biggest pieces of advice is like connect with these people.
Mhm.
These people have been here a long time. Get to know them. We did belong to the chamber, and so we were, we had our website that we
Yeah.
built. The chamber sent us, business. We went to all these chamber events, so we got to know, the hotels and things like that. And Gatlinburg is a pretty small town. It's the
Yeah.
town of only 4,000, so you get to know each other that way. So that really was critical. Um, getting to be friends with people in the national park. Not that they can send you business, but at least they know your face. They
Yeah.
know you're there. Um, and just advertising, being at the right place at the right time, putting brochures everywhere. I mean, it was a lot of kind of pounding that pavement, that first year. But we did, we got a lot of these people who maybe had not considered going into the park, and they
Mhm.
were like, "Oh wow, I didn't." A lot of people are like, "There's a national park here," but also like they drive through and they don't really know what they're doing, right?
Right.
You've got all these beautiful pull-offs, and but to actually be able to go in there and feel safe, feel like somebody's got your back, feel like somebody understands the ecosystem, and how to cross a creek without falling, how to be bear aware, all those types of things. And so it was just little incremental steps like that.
Mhm.
We're reaching out to these local businesses that then
Yeah.
helped us, these tourists.
Yeah, I think that that's really important, like what you just said about connecting with other local businesses, right? Even if they might be your competition, right?
Yeah.
Is how, because I firmly believe, and I've seen this even in my own experience. So back in like 2018, I'm kind of a serial entrepreneur and I just like starting businesses. And this was when like right before axe throwing became like mainstream. And so I started the first axe throwing business in the Tri-Cities. It was the first one in like a 300-mile radius, and had all of these great big plans for making a franchise out of it and doing all of these cool things. But one of the things that I did was I just went around to all of these local businesses, even entertainment venues that could potentially do the same thing that I was doing, to try to form relationships and friendships. Because I really believe that if businesses in the community are going to grow, the only way that they can really do that is if they do it together. And look at Burger Kings and McDonald's is like you prefer, probably, well, you don't, you're a vegetarian, I guess. So you prefer one or the other.
Burger King.
Well, you're right, right? You prefer one or the other, right? Any kind of products or services that are similar, offer similar services or products, you typically can prefer one over the other, but there's enough room because the market is large enough for that. So I think that was really wise of you to really lean into that. Now, tell me this, when did you guys start your business?
1998. This is our start of our 26th year.
Wow, 1998. So this is I mean the industry has changed a lot since then.
Yeah, social media, all of that marketing.
Yeah. So what even then, I mean, because the internet was around, but like
Yeah.
what were some of the early kind of like internet marketing tactics that you took at that point in your journey?
Well, we had a really great website. A friend of ours who, was a little web geek. He knew all about search engines and
Mhm.
keywords and all that type of thing. He actually helped us build our website. And so that definitely helped. And then, understanding that every time somebody reaches out to you and you can cross promote each other and put each other on each other's websites, that's going to bring you up in search engines. So having
100%.
a little bit of that understanding, and that goes back to having a marketing background, having a business background, it's one thing to make a really pretty website, but then what? So how are you going to get up, and now of course, there's a whole different SEO pattern, but back then it was pretty easy. It was, search engines, keywords, that kind of thing. So we wrote a lot of copy and with a lot of keywords back in those days. And then there was, brochures, and that was a big deal. Merchandise, walking around with our T-shirts again. And we now wrap all of our vehicles, but we had magnets with our logos, so that was kind of eye catching. People would, see
Yeah.
who we were.
Yeah. No, I love that. Like especially, and I love too, like with your marketing background, right? Of how you most outfitters don't have that. Most people like yourself do not have that knowledge or that background as they're starting their business. And so many of the times, that I speak with outfitter owners like yourself, it's like, oh, I have a website, and it's like, and they're like, oh, I'm ranking number one. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, what are you ranking number one for? And then they'll tell me, and I'm like, yeah, that's great. Nobody's looking for that.
Hmm.
And there's just a lack of knowledge around that. But I firmly believe that if you just study and you find the right resources, anybody can do it. It's just a matter of time and knowledge, right? So it's really cool to see how you kind of already kind of came in with a little bit of an upper hand with that knowledge of marketing because it is really, really important. Word of mouth, especially I think today, doesn't cut it anymore. Like in the society that we live in, the digital age that we live in, you have to have some sort of strategy to be found online. So I think that's really cool how that's even grown for you starting out that way. So as you in that first year in 1998, and even marketing has changed a lot since then. You've talked about how you did that kind of organically, locally, and online. What were some of the biggest challenges that you initially ran into as you were launching your business that you were just like, man, I don't, how do we get past this? What do we do?
Um, well, the mindset where you just have to understand you're not going to make any money.
Mm.
You know, like the first client we got, I think we got $14. And it was both Erik and I together. We took her to Andrews Falls, and that was a great, woo, celebrate. But just really, I mean, like it was one thing to go, yes, we're not going to make any money. But then it was another thing that, the reality is like, we're not going to make any
Yeah.
money. And so that was a little bit of a kick in the butt, like, okay, we gotta, ramp it up a little bit.
Yeah.
And and so we did a lot more connecting with we started doing storytelling. We kind of got out of our, comfort zone and did a little bit more just peripheral stuff. um but yeah, I think that was the biggest challenge, just psychologically, because you do get excited and you're like, yes, I've got this perfect business, everybody's gonna flock to me, and they don't. A long time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's encouraging. Again, like I think we all start with that passion and that idea of what you just said. Everyone, of course, it's a great business idea, and people are going to love me, and
Yeah.
they will eventually. But like, I lost money my first year of business, and it, I not that I didn't make any money, I lost money. I was in the red, And to be able to push through, one of my mentors told me one time, right when I was starting my axe throwing business, actually, he said, "Are you passionate about axe throwing?" And I'm like, "Well, no, but it's a great business model and it's a
Hmm.
great business idea." And he says, "Well, if you're not passionate about it, when things get really hard, you're just going to quit." And I did. I quit. I
Yeah.
grew it. I had employees, and I was just like, "Yeah, this kind of sucks though now. Like I'm not passionate about it." It actually wasn't tough. Like things were going great, but I just the passion wasn't there for me to keep moving forward. I wanted to start something new. And the fact that that passion, when you have a passion for your business, which is what this whole show is about, turning your passion into a profession, that passion can push you through those really, really difficult and trying times and really be your driving force moving forward. And so that actually kind of even moves us into this next question is, what is your why behind running your business? Because that why is what kept you pushing forward in that first, year or two to being in your 26th year now doing
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. Well, definitely our mission, which is, connecting people to the natural world, and direct positive experiences.
Mm.
That's the drive, right? Just having that, understanding that people are tired and they want that connection. And of course, now even after the pandemic, it's even more. But having that seeing people get into the woods
Mm.
and taking their feet off and or their shoes off and getting their feet in a pile of moss, or walking in a stream, a cold stream, or smelling a twig and having it be familiar. A birch twig smells like mint, and so understanding the stories behind these things. So seeing that spark in people, and those aha moments where it's like, oh, this is familiar, this feels great,
Mm.
you're just, all the stress is melting off of you. That's our why. Falling in love with the Smokies, and then going back and applying it to the natural world. People, taking, getting rid of the non-native plants and planting, native plants. Understanding that we are not a part of nature, but we are, nature. Just that continues to be my passion. That continues to be our why, and that's who we hire. Guides who have that kind of excitement and passion. And it's easy. I think a lot of guide services will take somebody from a point A to point B,
Yeah.
but to watch somebody have those aha moments in the natural world and understand these webs of life, and how that little bug is so important. And it's not just the bears that are, I mean, it's an exciting experience to see a bear,
Sure.
but to see a bee that's only found in the Smokies and nowhere else in the world, I mean, I just get goosebumps. It's just, to me, that's mind-blowing.
Yeah. That's really cool. And I think too, because the Great Smoky Mountain National Park, isn't it home to like a really diverse population of was it salamanders
Now,
or
we're the most biodiverse place in the world.
yeah.
And right now we're at 31 species of salamanders. They had just discovered another one. We're pretty sure we're going to be at 32 pretty soon. And the next most biodiverse salamander, habitat is in Mexico, and I think they've got 25 species.
That is crazy.
So yeah. And if you took all of our salamanders and put them on a scale and compared them to the mammals, the salamanders would outweigh the mammals by 3 to 5 times.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, that is mind blowing. Just sit in a creek and to watch the little aquatic life, and to see a salamander poke his little nose out from under a rock is just like, that's life changing.
Yeah. And if you ever do come across a hellbender in a creek, those things are pretty huge.
They are
They could freak somebody out.
a little scary to see.
They kind of are a little weird
What is
looking.
that? Yeah.
Oh, wow. So as you, and I imagine, even after hearing your mission statement and, I imagine the experience that you had there from kind of that naturalist in Dahlonega, how much of that has really shaped your vision for your business, and how you're caring for guests and walking in the woods with them is not just walking in the woods. You're really you're really doing your best, I think, to educate them, right, on all of the things around them, the natural world. So, I mean, what does that look like? If somebody were to come on a trip with you, like what can they expect to experience on their walk in the woods with you?
Um, we use the Joseph Cornell sharing nature with children model, where you grab their attention right away. And so, that's what you want to do. Like, one of my favorite things on some of my walks is to have 7 or 8 people form a circle and talk about how that was the average size tree in the East, 150 years ago. So something like that, where it's just like that wow moment immediately gets people. And it's telling a narrative,
Mhm.
being a storyteller, and pointing things out, but showing, not telling, like really getting people to explore using all of their senses. um and by the end, they have a story. They've got, characters, and they've got the arc and the narrative and the conclusion, and it's all kind of brings it together. And I try very much to teach that to our staff, our incoming guides, that you are a storyteller.
Yeah.
You are not, you can show somebody, like, yeah, that's a hemlock tree, and you can talk about, what it looks like. But to talk about what the Cherokee used it for, and what the settlers used it for, and how
Mm.
important, a hemlock tree was to our ecosystems, things like that, that's a whole different level of connecting with that natural world.
Yeah,
So
that's really good. Yeah, I think too, what you I'll butcher how you said it really beautifully and eloquently, and I'll butcher it if I tried to say it again. But basically, how you're trying to lead people in this experience to discover for themselves, without you're right, without giving them the answer around here, but helping them to this point of self-discovery. And I think that's such a beautiful thing. The one, whether it's in nature, or whether it's in, our emotional state, just self-discovery, self-awareness is, I think, is really key. And the fact that you get to facilitate that for people outdoors in these really amazing places is, man, what a cool perk to your job, right?
sure.
Um, so as you've been doing this, and this is probably going to be a really hard question for you to answer because you probably have tons and tons of experiences, but what has been one of the most memorable experiences that you've had while running your business? And this could be while you've been like on the trail with somebody, it could be off trail, but like what's one of the most memorable things that kind of sticks out to you in this 26-year journey that you've had?
I mean, there have been many. You're right. um I think one that really changed my life almost. I mean, I guess what it did was it reinforced why of what I was doing. I had a group of upward bound kids that we took, and upward bound kids are really, inner city children. A lot of these kids, they just live in concrete. They
Yeah.
live in really abysmal situations. And they'd never been in the woods before. They'd barely seen trees. I mean, it was just like, oof. And I took them on a hike on the Appalachian Trail, and they were middle school kids to, I guess maybe young high school kids. And it was raining, and it was just miserable. It's just one of those Smoky Mountain days, and I just wasn't connecting with these kids at all. I mean, they wanted to go back to the bus, and they were just done. Um, so we get up to we're heading towards Charlie's Bunyan, and we get to this area where there's just nothing but just mud and red clay, and it was just icky, and we were stepping through it. And so I sat down, and I grabbed a ball of red clay, and I started making a bowl. And these kids all just stopped, and they were like, "What? This lady is crazy. What is she doing?" And so I just started talking about, the importance of, pottery, and and what, using these natural resources were, and how people lived, off the land, and they would take things that they would see, and they would, use it and make functional things, and all while I was making this bowl. Next thing I know, all these kids sit down in the mud in the pouring rain, and they all start making their own bowls out of this clay. I mean, it was so beautiful to watch. And they didn't want to go back. They were having the best time. And finally, at the end of the trip, they're covered in mud, and they're just, and they were so happy. They were just so happy. It was just like this thing, shifted. And I'm getting all teary because, it's just such an emotional, moving experience to see that. And that's why I do it. That's why we do it.
Wow. Wow. No, it's pretty clear to see your passion and to hear your passion for those that are just listening. What a cool experience. And I think what you did in that moment for a lot of those kids too is, they're used to a difficult home life, right? So the fact that they have a difficult time on trail right now, and this is supposed to be this in their minds was like, oh man, this is going to be an amazing, great experience. And then it was terrible, like in the rain, the conditions. But the fact that you were able to sit down in the midst of what everyone else would say, this is a miserable, awful condition, and to make something positive and to make something and to create something beautiful, literally and figuratively out of that. What a cool kind of rock, right? That these kids get to have this experience that they now get to connect. So when things do back in the city, back in normal life, and this can go for everyone, right? Back in normal life, when they've went through a challenging experience but found joy in the middle of something hard, that can carry over into our everyday lives in the city when we're not in the woods, in the mountains. So what a cool thing that you got to facilitate for these young people, that they're going to remember for the rest of their lives. That's beautiful.
Well, obviously I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and that, that's really like when we interview new guides, we're like, how do you embrace the suck?
Yeah.
What do you do to turn that around? Because that's your job as a facilitator, right? You are supposed to help somebody, see the positive in, just the most miserable, awful conditions, when you're on a trail, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's going to happen. It is inevitable, right?
Yeah, but you're right. It's a life lesson.
Yeah, yeah, that's really good. So and I want to ask this question. So like they're in, I guess, in and around the park there. I mean, how many other kind of services are there that are like yours? I mean, how many other guides are doing, day trips and stuff like that? Are there several?
There's a couple that are local. We're friends with one of them out of Sevierville, I think, Pigeon Forge. And then there's other like large groups that come in, uh, to bring people backpacking, but they may do things all over the place.
Sure.
And then we're also the guide service for REI Adventure Travel. So we do REI programs. So
Yeah.
we represent, REI instead of a walk in the woods for those.
Yeah, that's really good. And the reason I asked that question is like, because this leads into another question, but like, what makes your business different from others like you that are doing similar things?
I mean, I think a lot of it is just, that passion for teaching.
Mm,
Um, we are just very education focused. And we're also passionate about leave no trace. Not all other companies might do that. So we're learning about, how are you safe in the backcountry, but also how are you leaving your area, better than when you found it.
right.
We very much encourage all of our staff to volunteer at organizations. I'm on the board of Discover Life in America, which is a project that's counting all the life in the park. And we always have all these volunteer opportunities. So some of our staff come, and I've got actually another member of our staff who's on the board too. So going out there and counting, mushrooms one day, volunteering, with the bear rescue plays, or, as cleanup, adopting a trail, things like that. So we are very invested in the park and being a part of the park and our community.
Wow.
So, very much giving back to the community. So I think that's one of the things that makes us unique. I'm not sure what other guide services do, but I know that we're very, very, invested in bringing all of the education that we bring to other people, to our community too.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I think that's again, that's one of those, differentiators, right? That makes people drawn to you versus your competitors that are doing something different. Not that they're doing anything wrong or bad, but this is what sets you apart. And I always just love hearing that about people and their businesses. So as you think about, and I think again, I already know the answer to this question, but and you've talked a lot about this, but I think it's a little bit different than the why behind running your business, but what's the favorite thing about running your business?
Well, having been around for 26 years, we have a lot of repeat customers, guests who come back. And, a lot of them were like little kids when we, I mean,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
would take, families out backpacking with 3 and 4 year olds when I first started. And now they're coming back, and, they're bringing their families, their spouses, their friends, they're sometimes applying to work for us. So that's really exciting. Seeing get people that we have shuttled, for example, since 1998, and hearing their stories and what they're doing in
Mm.
their lives. So there is that kind of familial, connection with people. People who've just been with us forever, and watching the trajectory of their lives.
Yeah. I love that. And that's what makes the kind of the guiding profession just so special, I think, is the community behind it, right? The relationships that are formed with people, because they could be this really lasting, long-term relationship, and you get to see people grow and change, and that's really, really exciting, to see those things in each other even. So a couple more questions here, and I could talk to you for hours. I don't know how many people would listen for hours. There'd probably be several, but um, as you think about kind of your journey, and I think about my audience, who's listening to this right now, there's I think three different types of people. One, the person that's in the same boat as you. They've been running their business, their outfitter business for years. They're learning from you. They're reminiscing on their own experiences and their own trials and their own, successes in their journey. There's people who are just looking for somebody to take their next adventure with, whether it be, hiking, fishing, rafting, whatever it is. They're just listening to this show to find and connect with a person who offers those services that they're interested in. But the third person, and this is the kind of the category that I'm the most excited about, is someone who's listening right now that has this passion, whether it be hiking, climbing mountains, climbing rocks, fishing, guiding rafts down the river, whatever it is. But they want to turn this into a profession. They want to make this something that they do for the rest of their lives, but they've just not done it yet. What would you say to encourage that person to kind of take that next step to pursuing turning their passion into their profession?
I would say, first of all, don't give up, go for it. That's what we're here on earth for, right? So if it's something that you're really, really passionate about, figure it out, pursue that. But then I'd also say be realistic about it. Understand that it's going to take a long time to get up and running. There's going to be a lot of background stuff you have to go through. You have to, really understand the nuts and bolts. But then, have fun. Go out there, study, learn the area, take your friends out there. And that's one of the things that Erik and I did our first year before we even moved up here when we knew we wanted to do this. We took our friends on guided trips, and, we practiced on them, and, kind of ironed out the kinks, and, figured out, the mileage, the clothes you wear, the gear that you bring, all that kind of stuff. Um, And then I would highly recommend, if you don't have customer service experience, to spend like 6 months waiting tables or working in retail, something like that, because that's what your job is. You're a performer, so you need to be able to talk to people. You need to be able to read people,
Mm.
but you also need to be able to care for people. And there's going to be crabby people out there. There's going to be people who, this is, didn't expect this to be so rocky, or I don't want to hike. It's raining. Well, it's the woods. It's the outdoors. So you have to be able to understand, all these things that people are coming into. Um, the fact that, learn how to speak to your audience, learn how to read them. If you're going on too long, like I think I'm going on too long right now, and their eyes start to glaze over, uh, it's time to wrap it up. So maybe take a public speaking class, take an acting class, take a storytelling class,
Mm.
learn how to weave these narratives in a way that is connectable to people. Um, and then do all the nuts and bolts thing, get your wilderness first responder. Highly recommend you do that. Wilderness first aid is helpful too, but wilderness first responder, first of all, it's an exhausting course, and so it's great for you and your mettle. But then you kind of understand all the millions of ways there are for people to get injured and die.
It's true.
And then you're like, okay, I'm going to be very hyper aware
Yeah.
of how I help these people cross this stream, for example. So
Mm.
you just have you're a little more of a humble experience when you're guiding your guests.
Yeah. Wow, that's really good. Wise words from a wise woman who's been doing this for 26 years. So I think she knows a thing or two. So listen, okay? Please listen. Um, Vesna, how can people find you if they want to learn more about what you do, if they want to connect with you? Maybe it's a business owner that's like, hey, I just have some questions. Could I ask you a question or two? How can they find you?
Well, our website, awalkinthewoods.com, is a great place to start. But if anybody wanted to, pick my brain, I'm happy to. I've done this before when people are like, I really want to start a business. My personal email is Vesna, VESNAP, at awalkinthewoods.com. So people are welcome to email me if they want.
Okay, very good. Social channels, you have Instagram, Facebook, stuff
Yeah,
like that?
Facebook, yeah, yeah.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, I will put those links to that in the show notes as always. So if you want to connect with Vesna on her website or email her some questions or follow them on social, you should definitely follow them on social for sure. But Vesna, this has been an absolute blast talking with you. It's just I'm amazed by your journey and just the success that you've had and the persistence and the perseverance that you've shown through that. And it's just you've really inspired me and encouraged me to keep going on. Like when things are hard, just keep pushing forward. It'll be worth it. So thank you for sharing that with me today and sharing this time with us.
Well, thank you for having me on.
Yeah, you are welcome to come back anytime you want. So thank you, Vesna.
Good talking to you.
If you enjoyed today's episode of the Outfitter Pros podcast, do us a favor, subscribe on whatever platform you're listening, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google, wherever you get your podcast, subscribe. And the second thing you can do is leave us a review. This really helps us to get more traction, get more exposure on the platform that you're listening to, so we can continue to share the stories of outdoor entrepreneurs across North America and inspire the next generation to pursue their passion for their profession.